to another episode of Last Week in Localization, the show where we talk about the latest from the world of localization, whether that is news, research, or events, or whatever else there is to know or that you should know if you are working or if you want to be working in this wonderful industry. So today I have a very, very special guest with me, and that is Stella from Translators Without Borders. Hi, Stella.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Very good. It's really nice to have you. I love the work that you guys do, and so it's a real honor to have you on the show. I really appreciate it. I mean, we've known each other for a few years now, so I could probably also introduce you, but I think it's nicer if you introduce yourself. So tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Sure. So, my name is Stella. I've been working in the language service industry for quite some time now, working for a few different language service providers, both in the UK and in Italy. And so my background is in, let's say, languages and marketing, but I actually decided 3 years ago now to make a change. And I'd always followed the work of Translators Without Borders. And I decided to work for a cause that I believed in and somewhere where I felt I could make a difference. And so I joined Translators Without Borders 3 years ago, and I'm now head of language services there, leading a team of around 30 people, doing community management, project management, operations, quality, and our language leads. And it's been an amazing experience to work with such a great team, enthusiastic and passionate team who are based all around the world. I live in Italy, North Italy usually, although I am British, as you might tell from my accent, but I'm actually in Dublin today, where the sun is shining, weirdly.
Nice.
So that might explain my slightly unusual backdrop. But
Thank you very much. And sorry to everyone who's watching. I did the one thing that Tucker told me not to do, and that is to go on a different tab while I'm live streaming. So that's why instead of seeing Stella for a few seconds, you saw Restream that we used to live stream this. So I'm sorry, I'm still learning. And I saw that there was a slight issue that I wanted to fix, but I think it's working well enough anyway. So I'm just going to leave it as is. So thank you very much for the introduction, Stella. I don't know. Before we go ahead now, I think it'd be also great if you can introduce Translators Without Borders briefly. I mean, you guys are very well known in the industry, but just tell us a little bit about the work that you guys do. I have your website up here as well.
Yeah, thank you. So, like you say, I think we are pretty well known in the language service industry. Been around for some time now, founded by Laurie Thick and Ross in France, but actually in the 90s. But then the changing point came for us after the Haiti earthquake in 2010, and that's when we became an official 501 registered NGO in the US. And from then, we've basically been growing. So the initial idea was to help NGOs provide translations to NGOs by really harnessing the power of this amazing community that we have of translators. And from there, the whole thing has really expanded, also thanks to the work of our executive director, Amy Ansari. And we've really we've gone through a massive evolution in the past few years. And we've gone beyond providing the translation. So this is what I was actually just explaining to Sarah, that earlier this year, we actually decided that the time had come for us to evolve the brand. And that doesn't mean change our brand. It doesn't mean that we're not Translators Without Borders anymore. We are still Translators Without Borders, but we are also Clear Global. And the reason that we decided that we needed to do this is because a lot of the work that we have been doing and a lot of the need that we have seen shows us that within the humanitarian and development sectors, there is a huge gap when it comes to language and communication, guidance and support in these areas. Mm-hmm. And that's what we have been trying to fill over the years, where we have seen that there is a need. And so beyond Translators Without Borders and the provision of language services to nonprofits and UN agencies, what we've also been doing is working a lot on research into languages, what language is spoken where, language mapping, which is essential in a crisis for the aid agencies to know what language do we need to put this information out in. So if we have messaging announcements that we need to put out to the community to tell them where they need to go to stay safe, if it's not in the right language, then it's useless. And there is no database anywhere of what language is spoken where, obviously, because it's such a changing situation, especially in a crisis. You have people who are moving around. So whenever there is a crisis situation or a humanitarian crisis, then what we aim to do is to use the available information and then combine that with our own research. And we also work together with other organizations so that they can ask questions about languages and communication preferences when they are on the ground, and then we can collate that data and feed it back to the other organizations. So that's the Clear Insights, or that's a piece of work that they do. Also a lot of research into languages and the use of language. Then we also have Clear Tech, which is our focus on language technology. So what we have been working on over the past few years is trying to help build the data and also practical language solutions for language technology in marginalized languages. So the languages that get left behind by big tech. And indeed, last year during COVID, we were working together with a number of the big tech companies to build data for marginalized languages. So that's the Clear Tech initiative. But yeah, the important thing is that Translators Without Borders, we're here to stay. Translators Without Borders is what we, very well known within the language service industry. And a lot of our community members, they really feel that, it's a big part of who they are and also our past and who we are. So Translators Without Borders isn't going anywhere. We're just growing and expanding.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic because like you said as well, or like what we've highlighted as well from NIMSY is that these days, it's no longer just about translation anymore. There's a lot of services and a lot of needs that go beyond the pure provision of translation. And so, yeah, it's fantastic that an organization like yours is taking on such really challenging and great tasks as well. Maybe we can illustrate this actually with one map that you've given me just before we started. And that is the Language Map of Afghanistan. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So this is actually, so as I mentioned, we do build these maps whenever we can. We've actually been trying to build as many maps as possible, and we have them all available on our website. So the information that we have about Afghanistan at the moment is, I think you're sharing the map, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we did some work. We have been actually trying to do a lot of work, even prior to this crisis situation. It was one of the key areas that we had identified as being at risk from also a communication and language perspective, as well as being at risk of humanitarian situations. So we have been working with our partners for some time, doing a number of different projects in Afghanistan. And the map that you're sharing was actually put together in 2020 when we were working together with another organization. And we were actually doing research into the communication preferences and basically a snapshot of how people in Afghanistan get their information on a daily basis, and also what languages are spoken. So from the map, it kind of shows you that there's in Afghanistan, there are between 40 and 59 languages that are spoken. So even though Dari and Pashto are by far the largest languages and cover the majority of the population. There are a few other languages, such as Uzbeki and Turkmeni, Urdu, that are spoken by a fairly significant proportion of the population. And then you also have some much smaller languages, and then a lot of minority languages as well that are spoken. But I think the other interesting thing about the communication situation in Afghanistan is that this is also a low literacy context.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think the overall literacy figures are that there are 38% of the population is literate. So we're actually looking at less than half of the population. And also there is a difference between the literacy rate among men and the literacy rate among women. So 52% for men, so half of men are literate, and just 24% for women. So that's 1 in 4 women who are literate. So of course, that then has an impact on how you communicate with people. And so what our study showed was actually the best way and the most used way to get information is community radio.
Okay, yeah.
And so the especially in rural areas, radio remains the primary information source in rural Afghanistan. So about 75% of households are relying on radio to get their information. And most radio stations are broadcasting in a mixture of Dari and Pashto. And then depending on the geographical area, the kind of proportion of, the languages that they use will change according to the local makeup, right, of the languages.
Oh, that's cool. A quick question about the map, actually. What do the different colors mean? Do you know, is it just is that like a concentration because Kabul is all red here, for example, and then it's really dense around here?
Do you know, I have to admit that I'm not an expert on this map, so
no
I don't actually know. I didn't put this map together.
No problem at all.
So I read the report and I didn't study the map, I'm afraid.
I think here the colors are explained
here. I think, the map itself is you can select amongst the different community radios,
and you can
and you can drill down into the information. So what we've been doing lately is putting together these more dynamic.
Yeah, really like it. It's a great map.
Maps where we're cross-referencing different data sources so that then you can drill down and get the information that you want.
No, it disappeared. Okay. Well, okay. Anyway, let's continue with the conversation for now. Instead of the map. I mean, even though I really like the map, I have to say.
Everybody loves a good map, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because, we're it's not so much easier to consume information that way,
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, I'm sorry, I want to come back to the whole literacy level, because that is something I was not that aware of. I mean, it doesn't surprise me as much that there's the literacy rate, that it is lower among women, because, I mean, I guess historically that used to be the way everywhere. And also knowing that wasn't it that for a while, women were not allowed to be taught in schools, and I think now again all the girls' schools have closed as well. So considering that, of course, that is not a surprise, but that's of course that's a very, very important thing to consider for communication methods, and something that maybe we might easily overlook, or at least us who are not as involved in the topic as you are. So.
Yeah, and I think that, and the reason why it's also important is that, again, if an aid organization is coming along with their written information that they then plan to distribute, then we can go back to them and explain, well, you can distribute that, we can translate this for you, but how much use is this actually going to be? We know that print media is limited for a number of reasons, not only the literacy, also the logistics and the infrastructure. So what use is that going to be? So, and what we have done, again, this over the last few years, because of contexts where there is low literacy, we've been very much promoting the idea of audio translations. So in northeast Nigeria, which is where we have an ongoing presence now for a number of years, we provide audio translations as standard together with the written translation, because our data showed that the literacy rates were low, and therefore we have a tool actually to kind of streamline the process, so that when our translators are translating within the translation environment, then there is a functionality where they can just record. It's very super simple, just record the translation, and then at the end that gets compiled into an MP3 file, which can then just be sent back to the partner and can be used on community radio stations or to be broadcast in the camps. So yeah, that's a lot of the work that we're doing, is going beyond somebody saying, oh, we need this translated into French, and our data will show, well, actually, maybe you need this in another language because not that many people speak French, or maybe you need an audio translation because not many people can read. So it's providing, that's kind of going beyond, it's taking on that role of an advisor and guidance, which is similar again to what LSPs do these days, right? You're not just a simple agency getting one document and passing it forwards and backwards. There's a lot more work that goes into the language service industry.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot more of this, what we said, the kind of becoming a strategic partner, an advisor, and what you mentioned as well, providing insights as well and data. And of course, that is something that we do at NIMSY, but it's also something I feel like that is becoming a lot more relevant in general. That people, like you said, you go out and you do the work and you look at what languages are actually spoken, then you provide that information so that people can really make an informed decision of what is really needed, rather than just request something based on assumptions or on something that is outdated. Because again, you made an excellent point in your introduction as well, that it's really hard to map languages because, well, people speak them and then people move around, and then the languages move around with that. So actually, how do you keep those maps up to date then? Or is it just because you said you have people on the ground and they report back? Because that sounds really challenging.
Yeah, so that's been one of the big wins for us, is actually now all the big aid agencies, when they arrive, they've included our 4 questions into their questionnaires. So basically asking people, what language do they speak at home? What is their preferred way of receiving information? Or what communication channel do they prefer? And so those questions, through our advocacy work, are now included as standard, and then that information comes back to us, because we have very close relationships with many of these partners, and then we're able to use that data. But of course, the Afghanistan map, of course, which was developed in 2020, so it's fairly recent. But of course, it will go out of date. So that is actually a challenge, and we don't have the solution for that challenge. Also, because just getting the information for one map, it's quite a lot of work.
I bet, yeah, absolutely.
We tend to update them when there is a crisis situation, or when we have an opportunity to work with a partner to do so.
Right, when it becomes more relevant again, because like you said, the work is that because it is so much work, I can imagine that you focus on those that are especially needed during certain times. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So then, can you tell me a little bit? We already mentioned some of the challenges. We're specifically looking at Afghanistan right now, just because it's the most current crisis, and it's in the news. Of course, everyone's concerned. Everyone's talking about Afghanistan. Of course, there are still many other ongoing crises as well, but I want to specifically talk about Afghanistan for now. What other challenges are there when it comes to translation and communication, or maybe what challenges do the interpreters, I'm so used to talking about interpreting, what challenges do the translators face on the ground?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is an issue concerning both translators and interpreters, and it's been in the news an awful lot. So in a way, this is good that for once I'm in a very obviously bad situation, but that the issues regarding the Afghan translators and interpreters has been very well publicized around the globe, the situation that you have people who over the past however long have been working as translators and interpreters, and now suddenly they are very much, the threat to these linguists is very real.
Yeah.
And like anything, it's not a simple situation. A lot of these linguists, they may be working for many different employers. So I think in the news, it's really been focusing on those interpreters who've been working with the military.
Yeah.
But that's not the only situation. There's also linguists who've been working with different governments or different humanitarian agencies, different contractors. And also they may have been working for a number of different employers, like any, freelance linguist.
Exactly.
So when it comes to the situation of the interpreters managing to get out of Afghanistan, it's not so clear cut about which country will be taking responsibility for which person. And of course, because we all saw the just awful, chaotic situation in Afghanistan with this evacuation effort that ended a few days ago. And so within that context, we ourselves, we don't really do interpreting as such, but we did receive requests from a number of our community members to see if we could help them. So we have been trying to do what we can, but in our case, we don't actually employ any of the community members. They're not official employees of TWB. So while we can and we're trying to help members of our team and our language community stay safe and informed, it is a very tricky situation. I think one of the important messages is that this issue has been so much in the news, and it is a really important issue. But at the same time, there is an element of not putting, by raising awareness about this issue, we must also be mindful of not putting those translators and interpreters who are left in Afghanistan at risk.
Yeah.
So because we received information that any translators and interpreters who may have been perceived to have been supporting foreign organizations, and again, it might not be just the military, it could also be humanitarian organizations, or even working with international corporations. Those people are now at risk, and therefore we need to be careful. So there have been some social media posts that have been doing the rounds showing translators and interpreters in Afghanistan, and just by well-meaning people perhaps wanting to raise awareness, they could actually be putting those people at risk.
Yeah, that's a very good point as well, to be mindful of that, where you're trying to do something good, but it has the opposite effect.
That is, so that was one aspect that I think it is important just to reiterate, that if you are talking about this issue, and of course the more people that talk about it, the better. Also, because today it's today's news, but tomorrow, as you mentioned, there are other crises in the world. Today it's all about Afghanistan. In a few weeks' time, let's not forget about the translators and interpreters who are still there. So it is important to keep on talking about it, but just to do so in a mindful way, so to avoid using any names. And then also, if you do know people in Afghanistan, the other thing to be mindful of is that communication channels could be being monitored. That's something that we've also been mindful of at TWB. And that's actually been a bit of a challenge for us as we try to respond to this crisis. So we have a situation where typically, a lot of our community members, we have community members all around the globe, and or it is actually quite typical that when there is a crisis situation, often the people who are located in country, they may not be able to help because they may have lost their internet connection, they may have lost their house, they may be living a very difficult situation themselves. Yeah. So that is not the first time that we have come across this issue, but in this case, it's particularly sensitive just because of that additional measure of risk and threat to linguists who may have contact outside the country. So we have been, for our own community members, making sure that any information about them has been anonymized. We've tried to ensure that there's no information that is public. And we've just been providing advice, also sharing, actually, this is general guidance that the various humanitarian organizations have been sharing, just helping people understand what they need to do to eliminate their digital footprint. And so we've been doing that. And for now, we have decided that we're not going to communicate with any of our community members who we know are in Afghanistan for until we have a better idea of the situation. We just feel that that's the best way not to put anybody at risk.
Wow. That's crazy that you have to be even, that it's such a struggle to to help like that as well, that because you're saying the communication channels will probably be monitored, and so you can't even get in touch with the people on the ground because you would expose them to more risk. So that sounds incredibly complex to like try and do something for your people without putting them more at risk.
Yes.
Wow, I can't imagine.
And we have received requests, like I think I mentioned, of support from our own community, and we are very concerned about them. And so while we can't help them directly, we obviously want to share as much information as we can and provide any support that we can for them.
Yes, of course. And so I guess without again revealing something that would put people at risk, but how do translators and interpreters, or just linguists in general, like what do they do in these situations, you know? Because so like, as you said before, this is not a new issue, sadly. In our community, in our industry, we've talked about this for a long time. I've read about it a lot as well. And of course, now it's a very current issue again. And it's actually great, like you said, that it's in the news so that more people are aware of the situation. Because I feel like in general, often, you know, the linguists, the translators and the interpreters, they get overlooked. We talked about this in a report as well on vicarious trauma. And I know you have something to say on that topic as well. That often you have, like, when you're in the military maybe, or in the police, or in other kind of extremer groups, let's say, or even in the medical setting, they often have support systems in place because they know that people go into situations where they might be traumatized. But they tend to forget about the interpreters or the translators that are also involved in the situation, and they don't get that kind of support, and they, you know, get this experience the same level of trauma, or even more intensely, if it goes more or less through them as a communication, I want to say vessel, but that's not a bit of a negative term, because I know, you know, there's a human there, but in this sense that it really goes through them as well. So I think it's great that there's finally been some attention being given to the linguists in these crisis situations, because it's way beyond time. Sorry, I actually opened like a whole bunch of topics at once here now with this. So I'm sorry, I want to come back first. And that is, so I have always asked myself this question, you know, when linguists help in a crisis situation, like you said, either with the military or government organizations or international organizations, humanitarian organizations, and then something happens, the crisis gets worse, there's a new regime like right now, and then they have such a problem to get out and get protection and get maybe a visa, get protection from the countries they worked for. And I never fully understood why, especially if you had such a long relationship. Some I know have worked with them for years and years, like decades even sometimes. And where even like I read that some soldiers said, oh, he was like part of the team and now he's just left behind. How can that be in like a supposedly modern world where like Western nations are involved in this and then they just leave their people behind? I don't understand. Like, is it because they work for different organizations, like you said, and then no country feels responsible, or how does that? What's the reason being given, basically?
Well, that's a very good question, and I don't pretend to have the answers to that. But I think what is at the core is, as we kind of know, this is kind of the language services. It's always, a profession that people tend to forget about. Interpreters don't have an official status. I know where in Italy, for example, you will have an official register of lawyers and an official register of accountants, but there isn't an official register of language professionals, right? Yeah, you can have court interpreters, but if you're a professional translator, you don't have the same status that other professionals have. So I think that the issue that we're seeing in Afghanistan, it's really kind of echoed in all sorts of contexts all around the globe, right? And the other thing is that often the linguists who are working in these high-risk areas, they actually may not be linguists by training or by education. And sometimes they are people who maybe have another profession, but that they are unable to carry out because of the situation in their country. They may have been trained they may be doctors, they may be lawyers themselves. And so actually they transition to becoming a linguist because they see that there is that opportunity. And when there is a crisis situation, the humanitarian organizations, when they go in, they need interpreters and cultural mediators to help them in that situation. And often the people that they are employing are not actually professional linguists. They're often, maybe young people who've got a good education level, they have a good level of English, they speak the local language. They may have been abroad. So those are the people who are working with humanitarian organizations. And that's actually another area that we've been working in as well, because we've seen that obviously these are educated people, but they don't have the right training. And as we know, being an interpreter or cultural mediator, it is a profession. There are certain things that you have to know. There are certain techniques, there is ethics that comes into it. And so what we have actually been doing is we do have a crash course in humanitarian interpreter training that we've been running for a number of years now in Bangladesh and Nigeria. We've actually trained, I think, literally thousands of interpreters. And we do it through the large agencies. So maybe Save the Children in Bangladesh, they've employed some people to do interpreting for them, but these people are not professional interpreters. And so we have a 3-day intensive course to teach them the basics of interpretation, and also to teach them, give them some background into the sort of topics that they may be coming across. And that is another element which, again, really sensitive, because within humanitarian context, then you're going to come across very sensitive subject matters. And as you mentioned, traumatic subject matters. So there may be a lot of conversations around gender-based violence, the PSEA, the prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse, which is like a massive topic in the humanitarian sector. The interpreters are in a unique position to be able to identify or flag those situations where people may be at risk, and therefore they have a responsibility, if they have the right information and they understand about people's rights and they know the right channels to be able to flag those situations and provide feedback, then that is something that they are in a unique position to be able to do, because they may see situations that the aid organization themselves may not actually be able to see. So yeah, and then they may also, and probably will, be subjected to it could be very traumatic information about, war crimes, violence, and that may be pretty upsetting in itself. So those are all the challenges that are coming into play.
That is just crazy, absolutely. And I mean, like I said, I've looked into the topic of vicarious trauma before at NIMSY as well. This article here introduces the topic a bit on the NIMSY website and can be accessed for free for anyone who wants just a little bit of an introduction to it first. And then we have a more in-depth report about this as well at NIMSY that's gated for NIMSY clients. But my point being as well that even for me as an interpreter, I didn't even consider this first, that this is a thing, vicarious trauma in interpreters. But once I started talking to people, and it made so much sense, and it's such an overlooked topic, even within the interpreting community. And that's just a crazy, like, how can we expect people outside the industry to know about this if even within the industry not enough people know about it? And sometimes interpreters I interviewed some interpreters for this topic, and they didn't realize they had this until we started kind of talking about it. And they were like, oh yeah, I think I have this. And then I talked to them, and they had all these crazy assignments, and yeah, some of them are placed in the middle of war zones or end of life situations and other situations there. And then you're just thinking, wow, especially if you're not trained for this. And people just think of interpreters just the ones that communicate, you just need to know the two languages, without understanding that you're also involved in the whole situation that's there. I mean, you're not like a device, you're a human. And also like interpreters take in the emotional information as well and convey that as well. And of course, over time, that leaves a mark, especially on the brain. I think after a while, the brain basically thinks that this happened to you because of you're also speaking in the first person, right? And these kind of things. So you're internalizing things. And so it's a very important topic. I always think when I think about the linguists who do this amazing and absolutely crucial work in crisis zones all around the world. I'm so amazed by what they do. I think they're incredibly brave. I always wonder how it can be that they are being treated so poorly by countries and organizations that claim that they are so humanitarian and so forward thinking, and that they care about people in these crisis regions, but then they leave their own friends and colleagues basically behind, who significantly also contributed to their success by being the communication aid and the cultural mediators. So I think that is absolutely shocking. And sometimes I wonder why people even do the work, when, like, do they not know that this is a massive risk, or is it just so bad, the crisis, that they don't care, and they're like, okay, on the one hand I want to help, or this is also the only job I can do right now? I don't know.
I think it's a combination. Obviously, there are all sorts of situations. I do think there is an element of, it's natural to want to help your fellow citizens. So if there's something that you can do to help, then you're going to do it. And if you happen to get a job as well, obviously, if you've lost your job but you realize that you can help out as a linguist, as an interpreter or a cultural mediator, then you're going to do it as well. So I do think that there are a combination of different situations. I think maybe, but you're totally right that it is one of those examples of again, language professionals getting overlooked. So I could just highlight also the work that Red Tea does. They have this a couple of initiatives actually. So they have this open letter project, which is really working to build. They're doing a lot of advocacy and really trying to build awareness about these issues. trying to involve language associations, but also academia and humanitarians, writing letters to governments and to intergovernmental agencies and looking to implement change. So really making this issue of the risks to translators and interpreters known. And I believe that they actually have a petition at the moment called End the Targeting of Translators and Interpreters. And they're looking to get more signatures on that. So if your listeners want to look that up and sign that, then that's something concrete that people can do.
Thank you for highlighting that as well. And yeah, definitely, of course, Red Tea are absolutely an organization to mention here as well. And I actually do plan to still have an interview with them as well about the topic. I see a question here from Tucker. Hi, Tucker, on your day off, tuning in. A tough question to answer and to ask is who qualifies as an interpreter? If we are talking about asylum or other programs, then is this for the official interpreters, or how can we include these, and how can we include interpreters that are doing the work even though they are not official interpreters?
Right. That is a good question. And I think so, yeah, because I've talked about those situations, on the one hand, we're saying that translators and interpreters are professionals and that they should be recognized as such. On the other hand, as I've already mentioned, it's true that a lot of the linguists in humanitarian contexts are not language professionals by trade, right? So we need to recognize that, and I think that's okay. I think that there is a need for both, and actually, even if we think about our own organization, so Translators Without Borders, anybody can sign up to join our community, right? And that we have a reason for that is that in the past, Translators Without Borders, they had quite specific criteria about who could sign up to the community, who could join, and there were quite strict assessments. And the reason why we decided to take all of that away was because there are situations and there are languages for which there are no professional translators and interpreters. There are no recognized qualifications. And we need to be able to get people on board very quickly if there is a crisis situation. So as I mentioned, often the humanitarian organizations, they're targeting the young people who are educated who speak English. Well, we do exactly the same thing with our translator community when there is a crisis. We reach out to people who we think could translate, right? They're not translators. Often they may be English teachers, or they may be training in other languages, but we think they can also speak a local language. And we reach out to them and explain, that we need their help and that they can translate like vital information, and that we will provide them with training. And as part of our training, that's also a transferable skill, right? That they could then, if they wanted, apply within other situations. So while some people might say, oh, but this is almost lowering the bar, right, when it comes to professional linguists, there is the other side of it. But if there is no language association, if there is no language qualification, then you do need these people. But maybe this is also a time when I can also mention to your listeners, as you may have imagined, right now we do have this increased a lot of requests coming in for Dari and Pashto translations, and we have, as always, when there is a crisis situation, we have received a lot of new translator sign-ups this year. Just in this past month, as a direct result of the work that we've been doing, publicizing this need, and we do have a lot of translations in progress. But what would be really, really useful is if we could get professional, experienced Dari and Pashto translators to help out, because the way that we are working is that we have the translators who can anybody can translate, but then we do have quality assurance processes, and we have the 4 Eyes, and it's always good if we can get either either a language service provider or a professional linguist, just to help us identify, who is translating the content well.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, sorry, I think I'm going off topic, but at the same time,
keep going.
At the same time, another of the challenges that we come across a lot is around the quality for a lot of the languages that we're working in. And actually, Dari and Pashto, we already did a lot of work on Dari and Pashto over the last 12 months because we had been doing a lot more translation into those languages. And the issue that we come across for Dari and Pashto, but also a lot of other languages, is that trying to establish quality becomes very, very difficult, particularly for the types of content that we're translating.
My internet, really sorry. But here we are again with Stella, because I think, we cut you off mid-sentence and I would really like to still continue the conversation. So I'm really sorry for everyone who was watching. I have no idea what happened, but I'm glad we're back. So we're going to seize the moment. Stella, I'm not sure exactly where we lost you. I think it was around where you were talking about Dari and Pashto. You had already said that you need more people for the quality assurance part. And then I think after that, my internet cut out, unfortunately.
Okay. I was just talking about the quality challenges that we have with such languages, especially in the humanitarian context, because there isn't a recognized terminology. You don't have such a wealth of content and information on those topics in those languages. And so therefore, even working out, well, what is the right term in this for this concept? Mm-hmm. It does become a challenge. And then just the last thing I wanted to mention on the topic was that, within this context as well, we have received requests from language service providers reaching out to us saying, we're getting requests for legal documents, legal translations for Dari and Pashto. Can you help us out? Because so a lot of language service providers, they struggle with these languages. So for our more experienced community members, we've been putting them in touch with language service providers as well, so that they can help out with those more complex translations where you definitely do need that professional expertise of both of the subject matter and of the language.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to briefly go back on what you said as well about, or what Tucker also brought up with who can be an interpreter. And I always find that a very fascinating topic, because when we tend to talk a lot about certifications, and you were also saying that it's important with the recognition of the status, or that there is no status. But yeah, I completely agree. There's so much, I feel like it's been overlooked, this, that there's sometimes like a need for languages, and the need for those languages is, not tomorrow or in 3 months or in a year, when, you have found the right person, or when you've set up the certification, but like the need is right now. And then, you just take whoever you can find who is able to speak both of those languages. And so I think that's a really, really important point to make, because there's maybe the ideal that we're striving towards. Of course, ideally, you want to have people that are educated and certified and all that perfect setup. But sometimes that is just not possible. Even either there's no people for that, or the certification, you can't even get tested for it. Sometimes there's no test available for certain language combinations. And also, like you said, sometimes the situation changes overnight, and then you need a new language, and you need people on the ground. So I think this is something really, really important to highlight, and something that always needs to be in the back of our minds as well. But at the same time, I feel like this shouldn't be a hindrance when it comes to official recognition for the work maybe that people do. Maybe that's a different way of phrasing that, but maybe as soon as someone performs those tasks, whether they are officially qualified and registered or what, but maybe once they start performing that task, especially working with the government organizations or the international humanitarian organizations, that they should maybe be placed on some sort of list so that they can get protection or something like that. I feel like that should be doable. And that should be kept separate, whether you are an official interpreter or not. You're doing the work, you're helping there, and so you should be protected as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're definitely right, and I think that's something that we should all work towards as a as an industry towards the protection of translators and interpreters around the world.
Exactly. Okay, Stella, I feel like we covered a lot of ground. And we talked. I'm already using up more of your time than I told you I would. So thank you for staying a bit longer. Is there anything we haven't highlighted yet? Because otherwise, I would move on to what the industry can maybe do, or people out there to help you guys and the people on the ground in the crisis zones as well.
Yeah, no, I think we did cover a lot of ground. So
yeah, so how can the industry help?
Great so how can the industry help? Okay, so I already mentioned, the work of Red T and the petition that they have. Other ways that they can help for us in particular, we're working together with a lot of organizations. We've received a lot of additional requests, working on a lot of projects into Pashto and Dari in particular. So if anybody has capacity in those languages or has contacts in those languages, then it would be great to get in touch with people. And also for anybody who doesn't, if you can just amplify our message and share on social media, then that would be good as well. As I mentioned, because we can't work with our community members in Afghanistan, we're targeting diaspora communities. And so, yeah, that's something very concrete and something that people could help us with, because in addition to we're supporting organizations who are still in country, but what we're going to be seeing, or what we are already seeing, is this migration. So we're already working with organizations also in the United States and actually in Mexico, with Afghan refugees who are arriving in the country and who need support there. So we're expecting this demand to continue for quite some time.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for that. I also want to point out that Tucker has placed the link for the open letter from Red T in the comment section on LinkedIn. So that was something that you mentioned earlier as well, Stella. So yeah, whoever, if you're interested in supporting this, and I urge you to, please check it out, click on the link, and yeah, as Stella said, do what you can. You gave out some great tips at the beginning as well, how people can do it in the right way, follow the best practices, and how to support people on the ground without putting them in more danger, which seems tricky, but also doable. So yeah, thank you very much, Stella. I really appreciate this. This was really insightful. And you answered a lot of my burning questions that I've had for a long time now. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for inviting us and giving us this opportunity to speak about this topic. And let's hope that we carry on talking about this topic for even when it's no longer in our newspapers.
Exactly. I agree. Yes, let's keep highlighting this issue and yeah, work on it together. Not just you guys and Red T who are fully in this, but the whole industry should support this. So with that, thank you so much for joining. Everyone at home, thank you for watching. And sorry again for the tech slip up that I had twice during this episode. So I'm still learning. So thank you for staying anyway. And thank you again, Stella.
Yeah, Bye. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.